Listen up, and listen close. Crime's a dark and dirty road, and all that's waiting at the end is the jailhouse or the hangman's rope. The masterminds behind tonight's case thought they could make some easy dough lifting a few shiny rocks, but what started as a botched robbery left me with a set of footprints leading into the unknown. The trail led me to the sleazy underbelly of New York City, as I put the pieces together and tried to figure out the players behind this rotten game. It wasn't easy, but a detective's job seldom is. Tonight, we solve the case of the half-track heist. New York City, a town where dreams are made, broken, and, if you're lucky, poured into a glass. The case that led me to the rotten heart of the Big Apple seemed a perfect excuse to whip up a drink that knows a thing or two about hidden layers and keeping a guy guessing. Basically a whiskey sour with a twist. The New York sour was made up of 3 parts that don't seem to fit together, just like the facts I was presented with in this case. However, also like this case, those parts eventually come together to give you a clearer picture. Let's get to work. Beneath the window of Garrett Garrison's library, the footprints in the flower bed told a story. The sun, having risen after a wet night, had kept the impression sharp, like the edge of a blade. I knelt down, squinting at the marks. They weren't just prints, they were a clue. A clue that could land a criminal in a cell, or worse. One of the dirtbags who knocked off old man Garrison for $15,000 worth of jewelry, in the form of a $10,000 pearl necklace and other assorted trinkets, had left a trail leading me neatly to him. The soles of his shoes had been patched. A rookie mistake. You don't patch up your kicks if you plan on sneaking around. Those patched soles stood out like a neon sign. He'd been standing right here, working that jimmy on the window casing. I had him. His feet had betrayed him. Just outside the flower bed, the scuff marks of his heels were dug into the ground where he jumped back after tussling with the butler. He was quick, but not quick enough. Those heels, again, the same telltale patched soles. And then, like a ghost, he disappeared into the night through the hedge, leaving his prints in the dirt like a calling card. I looked over to the adjoining window of the drawing room. There were more prints, this time from a second guy. No patched soles, though. These prints were just like any other pair in this crummy town. Anonymous, forgettable. Whoever this second guy was, he wasn't sloppy enough to leave a mark. His heels had hit the ground running. Clearly he decided to dust, and quick. For 20 minutes, I walked that lawn like some kind of ghost, inspecting every window I could reach, thinking I'd find the break I needed. I found nothing but frustration. No more clues, no more breaks. All I had were the footprints and the butler's shaky story. Suddenly it hit me like a blackjack to the dome. There was something off about those tracks. They showed where the first guy came in, where he left, and where he fought with the butler. But the second guy, why, he hadn't left any tracks coming in at all. Somehow I was dealing with 1.5 sets of tracks. I scratched my chin, pondering this new development. I'd already been over the butler's story. Same story I'd gotten from everyone else in the house, and nothing in it added up. All the same, finding myself fresh out of Leeds, I had no choice but to go back and make sure I had all the details straight. The robbery had gone down around 1 in the morning. The house was supposed to be empty, just a butler and 2 women servants who lived on the top floor. The family had split town after some relative bit the dust, and they'd made damn sure the papers knew it. Only the daughter, the kid, and maybe 20 had stayed behind. She was still in the house when the robbery went down. The butler, Schmidt, had been asleep when the burglars slipped in. But when he heard the strongbox in Mrs. Garrison's room being worked over, he bolted out of bed half-dressed, only to run into one of the thieves in the hallway, a masked man. They struggled. The burglar slipped out of his coat and tore down the stairs, firing off a couple shots. Schmidt wasn't having it though, and after a quick pause for slippers, he gave chase out the front door. The last thing he saw was the blur of tail lights vanishing around the corner. Schmidt and the other house staff had been with the family since time out of mind and were considered above suspicion. Well, given the butler's brave actions in response to the threat, I could sure see why. By morning, the cops had found a revolver in the gutter 3 blocks down the street and an abandoned car a mile away. Inside that car, there was a plaid cap the butler swore belonged to the guy he'd grappled with. There were other clues, too. The overcoat the burglar left behind in the butler's arms, another greenhorn blunder considering the tailor's name stitched inside it. Then there was the cap, a garish thing, bright enough to make a neon sign jealous. The revolver was tagged with a serial number. Somebody had scratched it, but not enough to make it untraceable. And finally those shoes, the cobbled soles, patched and obvious. Well, this trail of breadcrumbs, we should have had our criminals pinned down by lunch. And sure enough, by noon, the coat had been identified. The name on the order was bogus, but the tailor's memory wasn't. He remembered the face of the man who bought it and pointed him out readily enough when shown some photos from the police department's rogues gallery. The stool pigeon gave us the name of the cap owner, someone tied to the coat guy, a known associate. And that revolver? Oh, that was a beauty. Took a bit to track, but finally, everything we'd found pointed us to two low-life burglars who'd been tearing up the country for years. Dave Bamfield and Red Doran. The greatest mystery was why such men as these would leave such a trail. The two men identified were among the best-known burglars in the country, but they'd never before been known to work in New York City. This was their home, their playground. Almost any night they could be found in Icorn's restaurant with their friends. In fact, I'd seen them there the night before while I was propping up the bar. It didn't add up, no matter how many times I counted, but the evidence was staring me in the face. And so at noon, the police alarm went out to bring in our two master criminals, Dave Bamfield and Red Doran, as well as their known associates, Billy Evans and Jim Anthony. The pieces were falling into place. Now I just had to figure out why these pros would be sloppy enough to leave their mark behind. And when I figured that out, that's when the real work would begin. Say what you like about me, but one thing you can take to the bank. I'm a methodical son of a gun. Once I get hold of a piece of evidence, I'm like a bulldog with steel-trapped jaws. I never let go until all the pieces fit. This meant that I kept replaying the previous night in my head, when I'd seen Bamfield and Doran in the same joint. They'd been sitting at the marble-top table in the corner, doing whatever low-life hoods do when they think nobody's watching. The detail that stuck out to me was that they hadn't been alone. That goon, Billy Evans, wasn't there himself, but his girl, June Jennings, sure was. I slipped away and, while ordering another New York sour, found out that Miss Jennings' presence had been causing something like thunder in paradise. Could it be that she was throwing the whole gang off their game? As I turned everything over in my head, I also remembered seeing that two-bit creep, Frog Fagan, beating feet from that place with his tail between his legs. It looked like he'd just been turned away from a free meal, probably trying to mooch off the same crowd while they were ordering their supper. It wasn't surprising. That punk always slinked around the edges trying to get in on the action. But that night, just past him, I'd seen Evans, his jaw out in front like a dog on a leash. Guy was heading straight for Icorn's like he was late for something important. At the time, I considered hanging around and watching a brawl break out, but my neighborhood bar was calling to me, so I'd left the scene. Fast forward to now. After I'd left, these punks had been busy. The overcoat, Bamfield's, no doubt. The cap, Doran's, with his initials scratched inside. 2 down, 2 to go. And there was no question about it now. Doran and Bamfield weren't working alone. No way would they trust anyone else but Evans and Anthony to help them on a job like this. Hell, they'd been tight for years. It was clear as cheap gin and just as bitter. As far as I was concerned, the case was locked in place. The bust was so easy it seemed too good to be true. Jim Anthony, the cops found him in bed in the grip of what his wife made out was a life-threatening disease, but the bulls weren't picking up what she was putting down. She threw a fit when they took him in, and didn't seem much placated when they assured her he'd received the best medical attention the prison infirmary could provide. Doran was pinched walking into Icorn's for breakfast. Bamfield was arrested at the hotel he always stayed at when he came to the city. And Evans, he was found sprawled out drunk in some cheap furnished room, a bottle beside him. He'd lately been sharing the room with June Jennings, but she was nowhere to be seen. That's probably why the guy was half in the bag. The men were in full denial mode. They were shouting and cursing like it was the end of the world. It was almost comical how hard they protested. They were practically on the verge of tears, but they weren't fooling anyone. Thing was, though, while they were all busy crying injustice, I couldn't help but notice 3 of them looking over at Jim Anthony with a kind of weird curiosity. Was it suspicion? Puzzlement? Hell if I knew. Anthony didn't seem to care, though. He looked like he was nursing a serious cold, but I figured he was either a damn good actor or his chest really was giving him trouble. It could have been a little bit of both. No need for fingerprints. We already had them from past busts. There was no point in trying to break him with a 3rd degree either. And these guys were veterans of the game. We all knew it. They could scream their innocence until they were blue in the face. We weren't listening. The cops just stood there, grinning, watching him squirm as we locked him up, each in their own little cell. It's a done deal. This was one case where the only question was, how long it'd take for them to crack. I was heading towards the streetcar when I heard a yell from behind me. The voice was frantic, cutting through the noise of the midday traffic. It was Kelso, my friend and inside man in the department, looking like he'd swallowed a wasp, and he wasted no time in telling me what he had. "They traced the gun," he barked, rushing up to me, almost out of breath. "It's Bill Evans's. June Jennings bought it across the river last month. She's been packing it for him. That's why they got her, for gun maul, see? Come on, let's grab her." "Where? Get her where?" I shot back. "Evans's room," Kelso spat, already hailing a cab. "She was seen going in. Move it." Well, we piled into the car and kept the pace hot. Kelso knew the neighborhood like the back of his hand. He'd been here before. We slipped up the stairs of the lousy rooming house, quiet as cats, and burst through the door on the second shove. Inside, we found June Jennings looking like a deer in headlights. She reached for her throat, panic flashing in her eyes. I grabbed her wrist, yanking her hand open to reveal a diamond brooch she'd hurriedly removed from her waist. The thing was a beauty, 12 diamonds set in platinum. The description fit the garrison hall to the letter. "Holy cow, this is the plant," Kelso muttered under his breath. "Let's search the dump. The rest of it's here. I can feel it." I stayed on Jennings, making sure that she wasn't going anywhere, while Kelso tore through the room. Moments later, he made a triumphant sound that told me we were in business. He'd found a ruby and diamond ring in a tobacco tin. It was another piece of the garrison loot. We turned back to the girl. "Where's the rest of the stuff?" I barked. "Where's the pearl necklace? Where'd you get that brooch? Come on, spill!" June's eyes were cold, but her lips twisted into a smirk. "Look on my arm," she sneered. "How'd you get that way? The brooch was a gift from a friend. If it was stolen, how should I know? Prove it if you can. I was wearing it, wasn't I? You can't do nothing to me for taking presents from a friend." Kelso wasn't buying it. "Who gave it to you?" he demanded. "Bill Evans?" And June scoffed. "That skunk? He wouldn't." She stopped mid-sentence and seemed to think again. "Maybe he did, maybe he didn't," she said, all innocence. But her eyes told a different story. "When'd you see Bill last?" I asked. "Not since..." She hesitated again. "This morning." "Where's the necklace?" I shook her arm. "Talk!" She shrugged, a devilish grin crossing her face. "He hasn't given me that. Yet." I felt a growl rise in my chest, but suddenly I forgot everything. As without warning, Kelso slammed across the room, grabbed the closet door handle and wrenched it open. The closet itself was bare, but attached to the wall was a narrow ladder reaching up to a skylight. The fire escape. Kelso must have heard some activity inside, because just as the door opened, we saw a trousered leg disappearing through the opening. It could only have belonged to someone who'd stayed a little too long trying to hear what was going on, and hadn't liked what he'd heard. "Evans, by God!" Kelso shouted, firing off a shot that missed by a mile. I kept my head. "Don't be a fool, Kelso," I said, grabbing the girl. "Evans hasn't been sprung from lockup that quick. It's someone else, one of his pals. Go up there after him." Whoever our eavesdropper was must have known the block better than we did. We couldn't find him anywhere on the roof or in the streets around the building. June wasn't any help either, just sat there smirking at us, getting a real kick out of watching us flounder. After half an hour of tossing the room upside down, something that didn't sit too well with the landlady, we finally gave up. We hauled Jennings to the patrol wagon and locked her up at headquarters. Well, we hadn't exactly cracked the case wide open, sure, but at least we had something solid. 2 pieces of the stolen jewelry had been traced to Bill Evans's room. We weren't about to let that slide. When we brought June face to face with the dealer who sold her the gun, she admitted to buying it like it was no big deal. "Sure, I bought it," she says. "Bought it for protection against guys that grab a girl's presents of jewelry. You didn't find it on me, did you? There a law against buying a gun in another state?" After that crack, Kelso and I just stood there, looking like we'd swallowed a lemon each, still trying to shake off the aftertaste. We had nothing, and she knew it. Well, that should have been all she wrote, but somehow it didn't feel like this case was over. We'd rounded up the men without breaking a sweat, but the women in this little drama were proving to be a different kind of problem. "You know," Kelso muttered, trying to lighten the mood, "Jim Anthony's girl's got a temper that could melt steel." "Yeah," I added, "and that young Garrison girl's got a tongue that twists the truth worse than a dog chasing his tail." "What do you mean?" Kelso asked, eyebrows arched. "Well, she gave me 3 different stories this morning about where she was when the job went down," I said. "Reaction from excitement?" Kelso offered, trying to chalk it up to nerves. "Excitement in my eye," I shot back. "There's a pair of men's rubber overshoes in the hall with last night's mud on them. Won't fit Schmidt, and sure as hell won't fit old man Garrison. I guess excitement put him there. No visitors, they say? Yeah, right. What's your take on that?" Kelso didn't have an answer to this, but seemed to mull it over. "And what's the deal with Nell Anthony?" I asked, after we'd stewed in silence for a while. Kelso had more to say on that subject. "Well, I traced those cobbled shoes," he said, dropping his voice. "They're Jimmy Anthony's. No doubt about it. But get this. Guess where I found them?" At this point in proceedings, I wasn't in the mood for guessing, said so. "In the cobbler's shop, where Jimmy left them a week ago. But the new soles have mud on them, the same mud from Garrison's flower beds. Now how the hell did they get back there?" "And," Kelso continued, "Jim's wife and all the neighbors would swear on a stack of Bibles that Jim was in bed all night. Mrs. Jim herself went out and bet me her savings account that we're dead wrong on the whole thing. Now what do you make of that?" I didn't know what to make of it, except we were due another visit to headquarters. Outside the building, Jim Anthony's wife was pacing like a caged animal, her mood a mix of anger, sarcasm, and a touch of victory. We didn't even get a minute to go inside and report. Before we knew it, she was escorting us 6 blocks down the street and stopping us in front of the cobbler's shop where Kelso had found the shoes. "I know you've been in there and got Jim's shoes," she announced dramatically. "That's good and proper. But have you got brains enough to consider what they tell you?" "Yes, ma'am," responded Kelso meekly. "Well then, come with me and see that you remember the rest of this straight, you bum Sherlocks." And the indignant wife of one of the best burglars in the world led the unresisting forces of law and order around the corner and through a tiny door and a huge billboard which shut off a vacant lot. We found a handful of rusted wagons and a couple of Fords, their metal frames slowly dissolving into the ground, a testament to better days. The mud from the previous night's rain had only one disturbance: the prints of 3 pairs of shoes. One of those prints was a woman's. Nell Anthony stepped in with a grim smile, her foot fitting perfectly. "You see that?" she asked. "Made that this afternoon, looking for something I'm about to show you. Those are my tracks. Now look at the others." We didn't need to be told twice. The mud had a story of its own. 4 sets of men's tracks. One headed toward the back of the cobbler's shop, one with a patch returning, another with the patch heading toward the shop again, and the last returning to the little door in the billboard. Without another word, Nell Anthony marched us across the lot to the back of the shop, where she pointed up at the window casing. The paint was scraped away just below the catch, the job done neatly with a knife. "Now," she demanded, her voice sharp, "who did that? Who stole my man's shoes and put them back after pulling a job? Who tried to throw Jim under the bus when he's been in bed all night, as every neighbor will tell you? Answer me that, you rotten flatfoots." We stood there in abashed silence, the weight of the question sinking in like a ton of bricks. Finally, I plucked up the courage to speak. "Mrs. Anthony," I said, keeping my tone steady, "I'll allow that this evidence points to your Jim being in the clear, but tell me this. Do you have any idea who did pull it?" She scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Huh, have I indeed? I'm Jim Anthony's wife, and he'd rather see me widowed, much though we love each other, than have me squeal to you coppers. Go ask June Jennings." Well, the sound of her name, me and Kelso both tensed up. We have asked her, ma'am," said Kelso finally. Nell Anthony had already started for the gate, but hearing this, she laughed bitterly and flung a reply back over her shoulder. "Well, ask her again," she said. "She was boasting all over the neighborhood this morning that she was going to wear real jewelry. Go ask her, the hussy. I shouldn't say this much, but she tried to cop my Jim, because anybody can see he's the best man in this mob. Ask her. She knows the man who pulled the job." Sensing a breakthrough, I quickly stepped forward and put my hand on the woman's shoulder. "You said the man, Mrs. Anthony," I said. "Do you mean it was an inside job?" "Inside is right," was the cryptic answer. And with a defiant smile, she stooped and vanished through the little gate, leaving us bum Sherlocks to stare in contemplation as the rusted vehicle slowly dissolved, along with our solution to the mystery. "Inside job," I exclaimed. "Of course. The girl, the overshoes, those crooked tracks up at Garrison's place." My mind was still scrambling, trying to stitch things together. Previously, I'd thought a man's footprints as open as my soul was closed, but up there in Garrison's garden and here in this sordid lot were sets of them that didn't track it all straight with honesty and square dealing. Not wanting to waste time waiting for a streetcar, I flagged down a taxi and we shot off toward the Garrison house. Garrett Garrison was back by now, his face as long as a wet Sunday. He and his wife received us at the house. The banker was stone-faced, the kind of guy who could take a hard truth without flipping his lid. That made things easier for me. Straight to the point, without the hysterics. But what came next knocked the floor out from under our already shaky theory. Confronted by facts and suspicions in the presence of the old man, young Miss Garrison made a frank confession, provided it be kept under wraps, of course. Having a strong dislike for funerals, she played a double game. ducking her aunt's funeral with a sudden illness excuse, and using her time alone to keep an engagement with a nice young fellow who lived around the corner. The two had attended a theater, and afterward were chatting in the drawing room under a rather dim light, when they were alarmed by the noise in the upper hallway and the escape of a man through the library window. Miss Garrison, sharp as a tack, knew what kind of mess her lie would cause, so she pushed our Romeo, otherwise known as Tom Chalmers, right out the window. Coat, hat, stick, the whole shebang, except for one thing. The rubber overshoes that had both protected his footwear from the mud and hidden his tracks on the way into the house. Now the poor sap had crashed through the hedge and faded out of the picture until betrayed by his one-way trail. That at least explained my half set of footprints, but it left me with another question. Miss Garrison, I asked with a frown, do you mean to tell me that there was just one burglar in the house that day? One, she answered, her voice steady now, her father's hand in hers. I saw him clear as day. He came around the newel post, straight into the library. Dave Banfield, Kelso muttered. We've got his coat. And he had on a bright plaid cap, Miss Garrison added, her gaze steady. Red Doran, I said out the side of my mouth. We've got the cap. Just then the phone rang. Garrison answered it, then turned to me, looking perplexed. It's for you, detective. Grabbed the receiver. Mulligan here. It was the old man back at headquarters. He told me to go slow and take it easy on the Garrison case. Something smelled off about the whole deal. I said as much to Kelso. What are you talking about? He asked, already on edge. Well, I told him, Banfield and Doran got themselves a lawyer. They sent him to Ikron's restaurant to pick up their coats. Their what? Kelso barked. Their overcoats. They say they left them there night before last when they split in a hurry. Doran's coat is there, but Banfield's is missing, and Doran's cap, the one he uses when he's auto-riding and carries folded up in a pocket, was gone out of his coat. The waiters remembered that they'd had him when they came in and left without him. They thought they'd be back in a few minutes and didn't say anything about it. Kelso finally got wise. Holy mackerel, he said. Come on, Kelso, I said, grabbing my coat. I think I've finally figured out the brains behind this whole thing. Looks like we're close to cracking this thing open, sleuths. While I finish this drink, why don't you take a minute to get your thoughts in order? Then we'll come back together and see if we're chasing the same shadow. Kelso was never going to win any prizes for deduction. So, who's our guy, Mulligan? He asked impatiently as the car pulled away from the Garrison place. Our guy is a dirty sneak. That's who our guy is. The guy who stole Banfield's overcoat and Doran's cap out of Ikron's and left him behind at the scene for a plant. The guy who stole Jim Anthony's shoes to track him into the pen. The guy who used Evans's gun and Doran's car for the same reason. What I can't figure is where our guy got the nerve, much less the idea. Nell said to ask June Jennings. Kelso reminded me. She did, at that. Okay, let's go have a word with Miss Jennings back at headquarters. There's one more stop I want to make on the way, though. Kelso stared at me wordlessly, still with no idea which way was up or who was holding the map. 2 hours later, the mystery of the Garrison jewel robbery, with its mystifying clues and its track-and-a-half footprints, was finally cleared up. We were nearly at the end of the road, but we had one last loose end to tie up. We entered the room where June Jennings was defiantly awaiting developments. Always a gentleman, I brought a gift, a string of glistening, rose-tinted pearls. At the sight of them, the girl gasped, then flung her cigarette into an ashtray, cursing the world in general, and one Dash Mulligan in particular. Well, young lady, said the old man, it's all off, you see. Yeah, she answered drearily. I might have known the dirty sneak wouldn't have the nerve to go through with it. If he'd given me the beads this afternoon, I'd be on Easy Street. Now the whole works is off. I'm through. Any use holding those boys we got locked up? Inquired the old man. Not a bit, replied June Jennings. They were just a stall for a good getaway. You fell for that fine. Who put you wise? Oh, a couple of women. Nell Anthony for one, I replied, not without some satisfaction. I might have known that. She thought I was playing for Jim, but I was just sore at the whole gang, afraid to work in New York. Pah! Jim planned the job but didn't have enough nerve to tackle it. He laid out the whole thing to show how easy it was. Last night was the night for it, but they wouldn't budge, and so when Bill came into Icorns and acted nasty, just after they kicked out the frog... The frog! Kelso exclaimed, finally getting the picture. Yeah, the frog, the girl repeated. I chased after him, gave him the dope and Bill's gat, and drove him out there in Red's car. Well, I guess that's all. Yeah, said the old man, touching a bell. I guess that is all. The door opened, and a uniformed officer let in the slinking form of Frog Fagan, outcast even of crooks, who'd had his big chance and blew it as usual. I was almost out the door on the way to the bar when the telephone rang. I picked it up. It was now Anthony's voice. "Have you asked June Jennings yet?" it asked tauntingly. I'll tell you, that last shot stung. But we got our guy in the end. We always do. Well, sleuths, this case might be closed, but the Gumshoe Vault remains open. Come by again some other night. We'll blow the dust off another case file, maybe have a drink or two. Until then, keep your eyes open, your ears to the ground, and I'll see you